Hello. Now, before we get into the video, you're probably wondering where I've been. Well, I've been finishing this, my Ableton Live 12 electronic music production video course, and it's out now. And the aim of the course is to write a full song from start to finish that can be released on streaming services and played in clubs by utilising Ableton Live's 12 powerful MIDI and audio features. And if you've seen any of our videos before, the course is basically identical to those. Fully edited with custom animations and visuals, high quality audio and no rambling or waffling. And this course doesn't cut any corners. You will learn how to program MIDI drums, instruments, chords, bass lines, record and edit audio files, use audio effects, automation, song analysis, plus a little bit of mixing and mastering too. And this is just a brief summary. You can actually check out the full curriculum of the course in the link below. But not only that, the course also comes with our resource pack. Included in this is a starter sample pack of 133 samples, 56 Ableton instrument presets, plus 7 project templates, which are custom-made example projects made by me and some of the most popular electronic genres. And that's not even everything. You'll also get a 1-hour online one-to-one session with your tutor, which is me. And in this session, we could recover topics, we could focus on more genre-specific techniques for the genre that you're working in, and you could just simply get some feedback and advice on some projects or tracks that you've already been working on. And just to point out, you don't need any musical or music production experience to take the course. But that doesn't mean it's just made for beginners. Maybe you've been dabbling with Ableton for quite a while and you find you keep hitting barriers, not being able to finish tracks, and maybe not even utilising the full potential of Ableton Live. Or maybe you've already had a bit of a play in one of the other DAWs like FL Studio or Logic and you're looking to transition over to Ableton, then this course could be a real benefit to you as well. And right now we have an introductory offer on, which is 50% off the course for the next 5 days. This intro deal will end on the 23rd of November at 8 AM UK time, which is this Saturday. And if you want any more information, click on the link below. You can see the course curriculum, you can see some lesson previews as well. Now, with all that promotional stuff done, I'm going to be uploading some parts of the course here on YouTube. Not everything though, of course. And I'll be uploading a lot more of these over the next few weeks. So make sure to subscribe, and I will create a playlist specifically for these previews as well. There are going to be more video courses coming in the future too. This is just the first one. We're doing other ones on synthesis, mixing, composition as well, plus some other smaller courses too. But we're still going to be doing all the track breakdown stuff as well. We've just been a little bit busy finishing off this course. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Let's focus our attention to the session view in the middle here. This is where we're going to be able to create instruments and layer different instruments on top of each other to create a full song. If we look up in the top here, we can see individual tracks in these columns here. You can see they're labeled number 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're just the track numbers that are assigned when we create a new track in the top. 2 of these tracks are labeled as MIDI tracks and the other 2 are labeled as audio tracks. And these are actually 2 separate types of tracks that we can get in Ableton Live. These 2 types of tracks give us the possibility to create whatever sounds we want, but they are both different to each other. So a MIDI track here, you can see actually does look a little bit different further down the list, and also in the middle, you can see a MIDI track says MIDI from compared to the audio track over here that says audio from. There's also a slight difference at the bottom at the moment as well. A MIDI track is a way that we can create sound from within the computer. And MIDI tracks use MIDI information to program and create sounds. It can create any instrument you want, but generally it has to have a software instrument or a plugin to create that sound. And audio tracks over here are how we can actually record audio into Ableton using a microphone, and we can also use audio files that we downloaded from the internet or from our packs folder. We can use those in audio tracks too. You won't be able to use audio files within MIDI tracks and vice versa. You won't be able to use MIDI clips, as they're called, inside audio tracks either. So it's very important to understand the difference between those two. We're going to start by looking at our MIDI track here. And in order to load an instrument onto the MIDI track, we're going to need to go into the browser. These 2 folders, the sounds and the drums, are really the only 2 folders you're going to need to get started. The sounds folder contains melodic instruments. So this could be pianos, bass guitars, electric guitars. Generally, they are melodic and they produce a note or a pitch. And the drums category, as you might be able to guess, is where we can find lots of different drum kits and presets. To get us going, we're going to go into the drums folder, and I'm just going to scroll down and find the 808 core kit down here. Now I could also go to the top into the search up here and type in 808 to find that core kit as well. And if you want to clear your search, we can also press this little cross icon at the end too, or hit the clear button here as well. And when you click on the 808 core kit, it should give you a little preview of what it sounds like. If you don't hear a preview, it's probably because this little button down in the bottom here, the headphone icon, is turned off like this. So make sure that that's turned on if you want to hear a preview. But you're not going to load that specific drum beat into the track. This is just a preview of the sounds that are present within this drum kit. And this should make a little bit more sense in a minute. So when we're looking through the sounds in the drums folders, just to point out, these are all going to be using MIDI tracks. And in order to load this onto that first track, we're just going to click, drag and drop onto where the name of that MIDI track is. And if you've done this correctly, you should see it'll say now in that MIDI track 808 core kit, it'll replace that MIDI with the name of the instrument or the preset that you've loaded in. And there are loads of different presets in here to look around with to begin with, but the main reason I picked this 808 kit is just because it's very simple and it's easy to get started with. You can also double click on a preset to load that preset. But the one thing you need to be a little bit careful with when doing this is you need to make sure that you have the right track selected by clicking on the top here before you do this. I've been using Ableton for a long time and I still accidentally load the wrong preset onto the wrong channel a lot more than I probably should do. So that's why I prefer just to use that drag and drop, click, drag and drop method to place the instrument onto that track. When we do this, the 808 core kit instrument should appear in the bottom half of our screen in the device view. So this is what our instrument actually looks like. This is how eventually we're going to change the sounds in the instrument and modify our drum kit. But before we do that, let's actually go back up to our track. And if we look at the track now, we should be able to see there are these horizontal clips, as we call them, these rows that run down our track, our 808 core kit track here. And this is how we can program different drum patterns into our instruments. So let's start by double clicking on that first empty space there. And when we do this, it's going to create an empty MIDI clip in our core 808 track. You also might be able to notice that in the bottom half of our screen, the device view will change over to our note editor view, our piano roll. If we wanted to change back to our device view, we can come down to the bottom right hand corner and we can click on where it says core 808 kit there, and it will jump back to our device view. And then if we wanted to go back to our notes, it's just this empty space over here. You can also have both windows open at the same time, which is a brand new feature to Ableton Live 12 by clicking on this arrow here. At the beginning though, I would advise keeping that off until you're a little bit more comfortable because it might get a bit confusing. And if you ever do get stuck in the device view and want to go back to the clip that we're in, you can also double click on the clip that we just created at the top there to go back to the piano roll. We can see our piano roll over on here on the left hand side, and to make things a little bit easier, I'm just going to make this section a bit bigger by hovering over the line at the top and dragging it out, and we can see the instruments along the left hand side here. So we've got a bass drum, snare drum, hand clap, closed hat. And if I click the little headphone icon at the top here and then click on one of these notes, we'll get a short preview of whatever sound that we click on. Now, if you got to this point and you still can't hear anything, just retrace your steps and start again. You could even go into File, New, Live Set at the top here and press Don't Save and just start this process again. So each of our drum sounds have been assigned basically to one of these notes, and that's why when we click on the notes on our keyboard on the left here, it will play just that one specific sound. So our bass drum here is on this bottom note. We've got our snare drum on this note here, which is D1. Over here on the right hand side is where we can program out a drum beat. Now, in order to see how this works, I'm just going to click on the play button on our core 808 kit, and this will tell that clip to start playing whenever we have Ableton playing as well. And you can see when I press play, the little green play icon illuminates, and we are playing the track at the top. If we hit the spacebar now, we'll stop the track, but when we press spacebar again, it will continue to just play the clip that has the green play button illuminated. So you don't need to click on that every single time you want to play it. But when we do play it, you can see that white line scans across this clip and it loops over and over again. So we are playing the track, but it's just looping over around this clip that we've got. And in order to help us hear how fast this clip is playing, we can go up to the top left and turn our metronome on here, the two black and white dots. And we press play now once we've activated this. And we can hear our metronome playing in the background. This is giving us an idea of where our beats are playing within our clip. This is the tempo of our song as well. And you'll also be able to hear that one of them has a slightly higher pitch. That first one at the beginning there has a slightly higher pitch because it's telling us where the beginning of our bar is. If you don't like the sound of this metronome, which is very likely, you can go into this menu just on the right and you can change the sound to one of the nicer ones. We need to talk a little bit about some very basic music theory. So when we're listening to a song, there'll be a general tempo or beat in the background. So when you listen to this drum beat here, for example, there'll be a certain tempo at which you will nod your head or you'll feel the rhythm. And generally with like a house track or a dance track, this will be that kick drum, the bass drum in the bottom end. Now, different genres will have different tempos, but most of the time there'll be a very distinct rhythm within the track. And normally that rhythm that you can hear, when we equate this to music theory, would be called our beats. So we nod our head in time with the beats in a song. And when we look at this clip here, the beats are these darker and lighter areas here. And when we play the metronome, you'll be able to see when that white line goes from this dark section to the lighter section right here, it clicks, and the same here and here. So these are our beats within our song. Now, beats can be called a few different names. A beat can also be called a quarter note. A quarter note is more of a music production term for a beat, and the more classical music theory term would be a crotchet. But just think of it as that timing at which you kind of nod your head in when you listen to a track. Now, I'm going to place a kick drum on every single one of those beats to begin with. So to place a kick drum on each beat of this clip, I'm going to double click at the beginning of our clip here, just under that number 1 there. I'm then going to move over to where it says 1.2, or again, where that dark section turns to the light section. There's another beat. This is another beat. And that's another beat there. And this, what we just added in here, is a MIDI note. And this MIDI note is a piece of information that says, play this note at this given time. Wherever that note begins, play whatever is loaded into that note. And in our case, of course, this is a bass drum. So if I press play now, we should be able to hear that bass drum. It plays on each of those individual metronome clicks that we can hear. Let me turn the metronome off now because we don't need it anymore. And it's important to make sure you get this right at the beginning because you should be able to hear when we play this, the loop is seamless. 4 beats make up a 1 bar in length. And a bar is just a slightly longer division of time. We can see these bar numbers at the top here. So for example, that whole integer number 1, and this is telling us that we are in bar number 1 of our clip. And when we come over to where our next kick drum lives, you can see it says 1.2. And this means that we're in bar number 1, beat number 2. We go to bar number 1, beat number 3, bar number 1, beat number 4, and eventually you can't see it right now, but when we get back to this end here, if this clip was to continue on, we then go into bar number 2 and beat number 1, because we've had our 4 beats that make up a first bar, and then we move over into bar number 2. This is where people count in at the beginning of a song. They'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you start on the next beat, which is this beginning of the next bar. And what I'm going to do, I've placed down my bass drums on each of our beats. I'm going to place down a clap now on the second and the fourth beats within this bar. Our second and fourth beats will be here, 1.2 and 1.4. So now we should have a foundation of a pretty standard dance electronic track. So next up, we're going to add in a closed hi-hat, and I'm going to place this on a shorter time interval than our beats. So I'm going to place one at the beginning on bar 1, beat 1, but then I'm also going to place one in between beat 1 and beat 2 right here. I'm going to place another one on beat 2 and just keep this pattern going where we're missing out, kind of doing an alternating pattern. We're going on the beat, in between the beat, on the next beat, in between, on the next beat. You might be able to see in the background of our clip here that we have darker and lighter sections which show us our beats, but then there are also these small divides, which is basically our grid within the clip that we've got here. And you can see it's split up into 4 different sections within each individual beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we move on to the next beat where we have another 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 different sections within each beat would be called a 16th note. There are 16 of them within one whole bar. And we talked about before how a beat could be called a quarter note, which is 1/4. The reason why it's called a quarter note is because it is a quarter of the length of a bar. So 4 beats, 4 quarters would make up a whole bar. The same with 16th notes. 16 of them would make up a bar in length. I've not placed a note on every single 16th note, as we can see here. My note length in between the 2 hi-hats would be an 8th note between a quarter note and a 16th. So this is a quarter note. This would be an 8th note, which is half of a quarter note. And then we'd have a 16th note, which is a half of that again. So if I play this now, we get this faster hi-hat on the top with the slower kick and clap underneath. Now let's also place another note in between these hi-hats here. And this is where we're going to start to realize that this is a quite slow way of inputting a lot of notes within our clip. I'm going to select all of these hi-hats here. 2 different ways we can do this. You can either click and drag a big box around and select all of those notes, and then you can hit the backspace or delete key and that will get rid of them. I'm also going to undo this just to show you a different way. And undo is Command and Z, and for Windows it'll be Control Z. Another way we can select all of these notes and delete them is by actually clicking on the key on the left here next to the instrument name. So I'll click on it once and you see it's select them all. Again, I can delete them all. I can also, if I really wanted to, double click on individual notes and it will delete them too. I'm going to delete all of these. I'm going to add these notes in a few different ways. One thing we've not talked about is a type of tool in Ableton called the pencil tool. It's actually located up near our preferences and our CPU limit. I'm going to click on this pencil tool once. And when we do this, you'll see my cursor also changes to a little pencil when we're in our note editor. And the pencil tool, you don't have to double click to add in notes. You can just click once and it will add a note in. And you can also click again on a note to delete it instead of double clicking. But what you can also do is now click and drag to add in multiple notes. So you don't have to click each one individually. You can click and drag. You can also click and drag across different notes to play different instruments like that. But that can be quite annoying if you want to draw out a big long line of hi-hats like this. Unless you've got a very steady hand, you'll probably end up doing something like that. But there is a feature, if we go into the preferences and settings, and again, for Windows, this might be in your options folder instead. If we go to the record, warp and launch tab down here, right at the bottom, you'll see there is a MIDI note drawing and it says draw mode with pitch lock. So if you turn this on, when we're in the pencil mode, you can just click on one closed hi-hat like this, and it doesn't matter whether you go above or below it, it's always just going to stay on that lane. So you can draw in some very quick hi-hats like this. Personally, I don't tend to use the pencil tool a lot. I'll use this next method, which I find is a little bit easier, and you can use it in other places around Ableton too. So I'm going to turn the pencil off. For those who want to know a keyboard shortcut, the pencil tool is B, which is a bit weird. You'd think it would be P for pencil, but it's B for the pencil tool. The way I prefer to draw in notes would be I could draw in one note like this and use a key command, which is Command and D for duplicate. I can right click on the note itself and you'll be able to see that duplicate option up in the top here. Command and D, again, Windows will be Control and D. And when you do this, it just duplicates that note onto the end of the note you've selected. So if I do this again, it's just going to copy that note onto the end, and I tap that out and it will just copy it across the whole clip. But there is another way to do this, which is a new feature in Ableton Live 12. I'll draw in one note, but I'm actually going to make this note longer. And I can do this by hovering over the left and the right side of our MIDI note, and you can click and drag and extend the note out so it's a lot longer. Now, in this drum kit, this isn't going to change how the hi-hat actually sounds. It's not going to make the sound of our hi-hat any longer. When you change the length of a note with a melodic instrument like a piano, though, this will affect how long the note is held down. But with the drum loop here, it's not going to change our closed hat sound. But once you've drawn out this big note, we can use a key command or right click and go to chop notes on grid using Command and E, again, Control E for Windows. And this is a very, very useful tool when we come into the arrangement view a little bit later on in the course. So that's why I'm trying to get this in early. And when you do this, it's going to chop up that big long note based on your grid size. We can change our grid size by right clicking on the background of our MIDI clip. And you can see this section here is going to tell us what our grid size is. We've got 1/16 selected at the moment, which is our 16th notes, which, to be honest, I would pretty much always keep it on this. But we can go to 32nd notes if we wanted to, or 8th notes. You'll see the grid will change now. We only have 2 different sections within each of our beats. And so if I select our note and press Command and E, it will now chop it up into 8th note lengths instead. Just try them all out. You'll find the one that you like the most. As I said before, the one I prefer to use is I'd make a single note on my 16th note grid and then duplicate this out. I can even hold down Command and D to do this as well. We've got a fairly basic pattern going on here. A 16th note hi-hat with a bass drum and a clap. Now, to finish off this house drum beat, and we will talk about other genres in a little bit, by the way, I want to actually add in another hi-hat, an open hi-hat. I'm going to place it on this note here, which is in between our 2 beats, the first beat and the second beat. If you were looking at this in terms of 16th notes, this would be the first, second, third 16th note within our beat. And this actually has a very special name. This is called the off beat. It's basically in between 2 beats, and we can add this in over here too. This is on the off beat. That's the off beat again because it's between the 2. And this is also the off beat over here. Let's just press play and see what happens. And you might be thinking it doesn't sound any different. And that's because some of the sounds within this drum kit are trying to simulate a real drum kit. We have a hi-hat over on the left-hand side, we have a snare drum, and we have a kick drum. And the hi-hat can either be in this closed mode, which is this short hi-hat sound where the cymbals are actually pressed together, or it can be open, where the cymbals open up apart from each other and you hit the top cymbal and it rings out for a lot longer. And this is controlled by a foot pedal on the left hand side. The hi-hat can either be closed or open, but it can't be both. So this is why when we play this section here, it doesn't play that open hi-hat because there is a closed hi-hat already playing underneath it. We can delete this note if we wanted to by double clicking on the closed hi-hat that lines up with the open. But instead, I'm going to press the number 0 on our keyboard. I can also show you this in our right click menu as well. And it's up here where it says deactivate note. Press 0. And you can see it is still there, but it's gone to this dark gray color. I'll do this with all of them and press play. And so now you can hear how we get that alternating pattern between the open hi-hat and the close. Now, if you wanted your open hi-hat to be a little bit longer, the reason why it's very short compared to when we listen to it like this is just because of that reason we were talking about with the drum kit before, where the open hat plays, but as soon as this next closed hat plays, it will stop the open hat from playing. We could just click on the next note and mute this as well. And once we've made a basic drum beat like this, you can just start to play around. We can add in more notes. We can add in, for example, a cowbell up here at the top. I can just put this anywhere. It doesn't really matter where you place it, as long as you've got the backing beat underneath. Just do them randomly like that. Let's put in some toms. And very quickly you can start to get something that sounds very interesting just by double clicking, adding in notes. If you don't really like to use the mouse, we can also grab, say, a note like this once we've entered it, and the arrow keys on your keyboard will allow you to move this note around so you can experiment with different rhythms. And the same will apply if you select a bunch of notes too. So if I select all of these cowbells, instead of it playing a cowbell, once I've selected them, press up, I can change it to play this clave or clave. Never really know what the name of that is, but I can just experiment, move the notes up and down between the different instruments. But if I go left and right as well, I can also change the timing of them as well. Now, the only thing to be careful of with this is if you do go past the right-hand side, you see my note is right on the last 16th note of our bar here. If you do move it across past that point, it will go outside of our clip, and you'll be able to see this based on where this big loop section at the top here is. This is pink at the moment just because my track is colored in pink. So if you've got a green track, then this will be a green bar, but anything outside of this won't play. And I can scroll back across just by clicking on the bar number here and dragging back over.